And they say, we don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories. We don't want to waste the listener and reader's time on stories that are just pure distractions.
Disruptive America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. So taking a jump into America for a second, because as with the passing of the big beautiful bill, all the cuts, Doge, everything that came around with this administration, this was unfortunately coming. And yes, it's a very nuanced conversation, because while I agree that, wasting money on foreign aid and initiatives implemented by the CIA to psych out other countries with gender-inclusive studies or transgender plays or anything like that is unnecessary, and I agree with those cuts. Congress approving public media and foreign aid cuts, what you need to know is really, really speculative, and really, really needs to be this full conversation of nuance and what the pros and cons of this whole situation is. Because as we know, even with all the Doge, information and all the highlighted areas of fraud and abuse that, Elon Musk and other people have pointed out, we know that the Doge cuts are not necessarily going back to you. That cutting all these programs is not a win for Americans. It's a win for, say, the State Department and the Pentagon, that they're getting the increase. And as people like Steve Bannon pointed out, that, hey, if you're going to cut government spending, waste, fraud, and abuse, then you have to go across the board to the Pentagon, which is the biggest institution of lie, scandal, fraud, and abuse. That they have wasted trillions of dollars that they can't account for. They have had numerous amounts of audits that they have failed every single point in turn, and that they have not had yet to even touch. They're increasing the Pentagon spending. So here's a little breakdown. This is from a, local news affiliate covering this story. And here's what they say is the $9 billion cuts to congressional spending that have already been approved. So they already passed legislation to keep this funding, but immediately with the great big beautiful bill with the increased spending advice and the increased spending on Israel and the Pentagon, they immediately fast-tracked and redacted everything that they've already passed. So take a look at this.
National headlines, it's money that had previously been approved by Congress, now set to be slashed in a move that has most Republicans celebrating and Democrats say will be dangerous for the country and the world. Christine Frizzell gives us a breakdown of what's in the bill.
At the heart of the rescissions package, $9 billion in spending cuts.
It's a small but important step toward fiscal sanity that we all should be able to agree is long overdue.
Republicans celebrating the clawing back of those funds, including about $8 billion in foreign aid they say was wasteful.
$2.2 million to reduce xenophobia towards Venezuelan migrants. $3 million for Iraqi Sesame Street.
Democrats, meanwhile, sounding alarm bells about Sesame Street in the United States and other educational programming for kids, as the bill also cuts more than $1 billion from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds PBS and NPR, which supporters say are relied upon for information in emergencies.
In many remote areas, or if in states like Florida with hurricane season upon us, they rely on a series of public broadcasting to get alerts out.
I am not sure how NPR helps the public safety of our country, but I do know that NPR, unfortunately, has become really just a propaganda voice for the left.
Senator Lisa Murkowski, one of the two Republicans who voted no, also raised concerns that just like the big beautiful bill, this legislation was more a wish from the White House than a creation by Congress.
What we're getting now is a direction from the White House and being told, this is the priority. We want you to execute on it. We'll be back with you with another round.
She and others also raising concerns about the lack of specifics about exactly what will be cut.
Americans will be talking about these cuts at their diners, at the grocery store, at dinner, at the park, because the cuts will be felt everywhere.
This is the first rescission.
So you can see that this adding the cuts is really so vague that they don't even know exactly what they're cutting, what funds are going to be allocated where. And like I said, as we are furthering into this Trump administration, as we're examining the whole intentions of all this, we are realizing that these Doge cuts, everything that you thought was going to be in the direction of, yeah, we're saving money from fraud and waste and abuse of USAID and whatnot, they're also cutting things like Social Security. They're cutting things like Medicaid. They're cutting things like SNAP program to feed kids. They're doing everything in their power to demise the general public's consensus of safety nets that they have overwhelming approval of, that they've supported over these years, that Trump even promised and campaigned on that he was not going to touch the entitlements. And the reason that they're called entitlements is because your taxpayer dollars already paid for it. You pay taxes to these programs. That's why it's called entitlements. That's why you have the opportunity to be in that program. And as that funding is going away, like I said, that money's not going back to you. All these cuts, it's not saying that, hey, the government of America and Trump is going to hand you a big check after they've cut all this waste and abuse. They're sending it right to the Pentagon. They're sending it right to the worst of the worst. And it's sending right to the billionaire tax cuts. It's going right to the hands of Israel. It's going right into the hands of Ukraine. Remember, Trump said he was going to stop the Ukraine war? Well, guess what? He's approving weapons deals for them now. So all this is really turning about. All this is really turning a complete 180 to the false promises that you thought Daddy Trump was going to do in this operation. But it did succeed in a couple of things. So this is from that Hill article. And I just want to read this portion here where it says, Senate Appropriations Chair Susan Collins of Maine specifically singled out a proposed $2.5 billion in cuts to the development assistance account. She noted in a statement that the account covers everything from basic education to water and sanitation to food security. But said lawmakers still lack key details as to how those programs would be affected. So these are multi-millionaires, multi-billionaires that have no idea what they are doing because they have never had to experience being on Social Security, being on disability, being on SNAP program. They have never had to experience it, and they're slashing it like they're Jason Voorhees, but avoiding one of the biggest abusers of government subsidies and spending, which is the Pentagon, which is Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Elon Musk himself. They're not cutting his subsidies. They're not cutting back on his programs, even though they claim to be. They're still giving him money. They're still giving him opportunity, and yet they're going after programs that your grandmama or your neighbor rely on because they have disabilities. They have a situation that unfortunately requires them to be on this assistance. And the reason that they're on this assistance is because their money already pays for it. Their money goes into it. You are investing into Americans. It's not waste, fraud, and abuse if you're helping out your fellow citizens. That's investing into the country. Some people say that's socialism or communism, but that's what it truly is. It's an investment into the country. And they're trying to gut it out. For who? The Pentagon. For the deep state. For the CIA. It's not going towards you. So, like I said, this is a very nuanced conversation because as, you know, USAID, as it's not really about aid, as the title claims, USAID spends funds on DEI, transgender initiatives, and terrorist groups. So I agree that we need to cut this. I agree. And we have been extensive length about this and Global Affairs Canada and their waste and abuse of taxpayer money for initiatives like this, for primarily cutouts of the CIA, cutouts of the intelligence agencies to psych out other countries to do these intelligence operations overseas that have come to catastrophic damages. So I agree that stuff like this needs to be cut. But at the same time, I could also highlight and argue about stuff like this. So ABC News says State Department addresses decision to destroy 500 tons of emergency food. So as part of the USAID cuts, and this is why they've left this so vague that no one can really speculate on this, it leaves out a direction of whether or not they're going to destroy emergency food. The latest on USAID food commodities stored in the Middle East. And that is very concerning. That is very concerning. That 500 tons of emergency food that could go towards people within America, that could go towards people in dire need, that we've already spent the money to get this food and invest the money to help those in need, that it's just going to be destroyed. That instead of just rationing out the 500 tons left and just giving it to those in need, that they're willing to just destroy it, which it seems like a waste of money, not preventing more spendure. It just seems like more catastrophic damage to cut back on the spending. So this is what's so very gray area situation. It's not so black and white as people want to believe. Now, one of the key figures of this cut is NPR and PBS, that public broadcasting is on the chopping block. And just like what I say with the CBC, just like what I say with the BBC, the word public broadcasting is a really blanketed term. Because we have known for a while that PBS, while they do still get contributions from viewers, while they still do, the charity initiatives, they do the telethons, they get viewers to call in, they get like a tote bag or something. While there is that, PBS, CBC, BBC, they also get corporate backing. They get the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to fund them. They get initiatives outside the average viewer to pay into this public broadcaster. That's why I use that term so lightly on places like PBS. And here's an example of how PBS and NPR, the National Public Radio of America, this is their CEO, Catherine Marr, explaining that and really just demonstrating how Republicans and MAGA are actually on the right when it comes to the biases coming out of public broadcasting. Because if it truly was public broadcasting, they would incorporate the general consensus of the entire public. But as you're about to see here, this is like a caricature of what public broadcasting has turned into and why this gives perfect argument and a win for Donald Trump to actually do these cuts. Watch this.
As far as the accusations that we're biased, I would stand up and say, please show me a story that concerns you, because we want to know and we want to bring that conversation back to our newsroom. As far as the accusations that we're biased, I would stand up and say, please show me a story that concerns you, because we want to know and we want to bring that conversation back to our newsroom.
So while Republicans and people in support of these cuts are saying that we're doing these cuts to deal with the biases coming out of NPR and PBS, she's saying that, well, show proof, show the evidence. So here is a little bit of proof. This is back in the day, just as she was starting to be the CEO of NPR, as reported by Rabbit Hole here. It says, I think our reverence for truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is preventing us from finding consensus and getting important things done. So here's that CEO, that same CEO, telling the audience, now that she's the CEO of a major broadcasting outlet, the public broadcasting outlet, that we don't have to do any real initiative to find truth or educate or inform the public. We just have to do things that gets us into line. And this is really highlighting, again, this is like a caricature of why the Republicans might actually be right about this.
I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is preventing us from finding consensus and getting important things done. I think our reverence for the truth might have become a bit of a distraction that is preventing us from finding consensus and getting.
So according to her, truth is a relative. Get us all together. Get us a finding consensus. Get us all into line. Conform. Don't question. Does that sound like a public broadcaster to you? Does that sound like it's incorporating the diversity of thoughts from the general public that most general consensus would come together on? Or does that sound like a front for the average listener of NPR, which statistically is, college educated, white, adult, more upper class individuals that don't want to hear questions, that don't want to hear the truth. They just want to hear, comforting consensus when they talk about, LGBTQ issues and racism and rights of individuals, but they don't talk about the big questions. So here's a bit of an example highlighting NPR's unbelievable bias. And again, calling it public radio while reporting issues like this on a one-sided base really, really, really undermines the whole public broadcast perspective. So here, remember Hunter Biden laptop story that became an unbelievable scandal in the election, that they tried to keep it under the wraps, that they didn't want to be leaked out, that anyone talking about the laptop was deemed a Russian? Here's NPR. Here's their take on it. It says, why haven't you seen any stories from NPR about the New York Post's Hunter Biden story? And they say, we don't want to waste our time on stories that are not really stories. We don't want to waste the listener and reader's time on stories that are just pure distractions. Sounds exactly like what she said in the previous video there, that the truth is a relative, that we don't have to look into it. We just need people to conform. We just need people to conform in a simple consensus. That sounds like a brainwashing mechanism, doesn't it? That sounds like mind control. That sounds less public broadcasting and more sounding like the CIA, FBI, the intelligence cutouts. Sounding more and more like that. Here's some more examples talking about distractions. Here's Catherine Marr herself posing with a Biden for president hat, saying that the best part of AZ, that's Arizona Go TV, is my Biden grandpa hat. So talk about reporting on stories that aren't really stories. And it goes on to really just laughable implications here. So white silences complicity. If you're white, today is the day to start a conversation in your community. Today, like every single day, is yet another great day to follow more Black women, as well as people of all color on this website. And she goes on to other just race baiting soliloquies. She goes on to, saying that Donald Trump is a racist and, pedestaling someone like Hillary Clinton, and anyone that goes against Hillary Clinton is obviously misogynistic, even if you support someone like Tulsi Gabbard or anyone that is a woman of color that may have a little more consciousness. not talking today's terms, but past Tulsi, if you don't fit into that mold, if you don't fit in that consensus, she has problem with. So talk about distracting stories. Talk about, not really informative, but just giving the viewers what they want, or the listeners. Here's directly from the NPR website. And I kid you not, this is a legit story on public radio. It says what queer ducks can teach teenagers about sexuality in the animal kingdom. This is what they consider information. This is what the average, upper class, white, liberal, Hillary bot supporter considers knowledge, considers information. That instead of actually, having a consensus on the economy, consensus about ending the wars, consensus on the whole structure oppressing people. No, we're going to talk about queer ducks and their implication to teenager sexuality. Is that the general consensus of the public? Does that consider, does that sound like a public broadcaster? Or does that sound like someone from the top down wanting to bait people with absurd topics like this? Or how about this one? This is even more hilarious. NPR educated the nation on the whole community of genderqueer dinosaur enthusiasts and transceratops. Again, I really, really use the term public broadcaster lightly. I really use that term lightly when it comes to these entities. That just because it's in the name doesn't mean they actually do. It's public broadcasting name only. That's what it is. That's what NPR, that's what PBS, that's what CBC and BBC, all these national broadcasters, they say they got the, information and the stories that Canadians or Americans or British care about. And it's stories like this. Dinosaur enthusiasts by genderqueer people. I just really highlights. Again, it's like a caricature of why the Republicans may be on the side of this. And again, this is also another fact, as pointed out by Lindsay Penny, that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation made frequent donations, gave $4 million grant to NPR last month, making it the largest amount the foundation has ever given to NPR. The grant's stated purpose is to support NPR's coverage of global health and development issues. So this is why I don't consider NPR, PBS, CBC, or any of these outlets to have the true intention of public broadcasting, because they are getting subsequent amount of money in the tune of millions of dollars from these NGOs, from these government cutouts. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, billionaires are funding the broadcaster. And for what purpose? So that they can own and occupy coverage of global health and development issues. Well, good thing that Bill Gates has business entities and is capitalizing off of global health distribution and vaccine patents. So, of course, buying into public radio is going to influence those measures, like how NPR will make a science segment about how the lab leak theory is hokum and a conspiracy theory, even though it's been proven, even though the laboratories in China, where they first speculated, now Chapel Hill has taken the reign, we're studying and developing coronaviruses for years. In fact, that was the name of the laboratory. It was the Coronavirus Laboratory. And that gain-of-function research is what they've been doing to cause this outbreak. But they wouldn't report on that because Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation bought out the media, bought out those stories. So again, they're not public broadcasters. In fact, I would argue that people like me and people on YouTube and Rumble and podcasters, they have become the entity of public broadcasting. Because even though, yes, some of them do get sponsors, some of them, yes, do promotions, and some, podcasters are signed by corporations. Most YouTubers, most people that have a video camera that go out and record, or they do documentaries, they do research on important events, and they do these documentaries. Most of them, and I'm not saying everybody, but majority of the YouTube population get their support from their viewers. Get their support directly from the viewers. And if the viewers like something, then they're going to go along with it. And if they don't like something, that they're not going to go along with it. That is direct correlation of the public and a broadcaster. That's what makes the internet such a great resource for a lot of people, and why, unfortunately, a lot of the public television sphere, as much sadness it is for local television, and I understand keeping local affiliates alive. I understand that. I did a college term paper on importance of local television, and I hate to see, jobs dissipate from that. But as a whole, this is not 1975 where people gather around the one television where your family came on a Tuesday night to watch one show together. We're in this enterprise where, more and more kids are turning on to YouTube Kids and watching Miss Rachel than they are watching Sesame Street. People don't really care to tune in to a public broadcaster knowing that it's only public by name because Bill and Melinda Gates and so many other people and billionaires bought into the broadcaster to influence their publications. Hence why that woman is so perfect for the CEO, and such a perfect example of why Trump and the Republicans might actually be right about this, because they don't believe in the truth. Truth is a relative to them. And that's why, unfortunately, they're getting the deep cuts. That's why, unfortunately, they're losing their respect. Because the generation that grew up with this media, and you could say the same about even private broadcasters, NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox News, is becoming a dying breed. Because it's no longer the generation that grew up to the, simple three networks. And what you watched on TV was what you watched. It's now, streaming. It's now watching YouTube or Rumble or subscription services, or you go on to other websites, or you go on to X, TikTok, content creation. Like, it's a vast enterprise of so many different people that are able to become broadcasters. It's no longer back in the day where you had to, if you wanted to be on television, you had to sign a form and submit it to a public local station, and maybe you'll get 3 seconds on the airwaves. Now anyone can broadcast anywhere. So it's a very touch and go. Like, I feel sad for local affiliates, but at the same time, you kind of knew this was coming.